Let's move on to food trialing, the next slide up. And, I think Christina put the point across really beautifully there that, we can have super flea products. We may be compliant, as Anita said, or we may not be. But it's so important still to do the right workup, to take a really good history. We've got an itchy, scratchy dog. We're going to do skin scrapes, etc. We don't find anything with those. We then start talking about doing food trialing. And obviously there's some of the top diets, probably more than 10 years ago when they came out. I know that the hypoallergenic diet from Royal Canin and the analergenic diet, certainly the hypoallergenic I helped to launch in the UK in about 2003, 2004. I've been a bit naughty. I've put a tube of blood at the end there, suggesting that maybe blood testing could be part of the solution of this problem. Klaus, we'll get the American perspective first. What are your thoughts on blood testing for food allergy? And please, no swearing.
Well, full disclosure, my mentor in residency was Rosser out at Michigan State, and some of you gentlemen and women out there will know that he was one of those very strong proponents of diet trialing, and I fear he might have rubbed off on me on that one a little bit. I would say I'm hopeful that maybe in my lifetime we'll get a reliable allergy test for food, but I want to see some more proof, because the serology test results that I have seen have not been convincing enough that I would advocate for that for my clients. So diet trials for me are still diet trial for 60 to 90 days. I don't know how hard it has hit you guys, but we have obviously had a lot of these what they call boutique diet issues here in the US with the cardiac consequences for our patients. And I've, as a result of that, had to steer away from where my previous standard of home cooking was
Yes.
my first choice. So I've gone to the commercial diets as my go-to to avoid having issues with cardio complications for my diet.
And do you tend to use hydrolysate diets?
Yes, that is probably 95%. And then we do have a company here in the US that's called Ryan Nutrition that specializes in making extreme weird diets with a PCR and DNA test for purity. And they use like crocodile and alligator and kangaroo as their protein sources.
Great, okay. Anita, thoughts on blood testing for allergy in the UK?
I don't think there's a place for blood testing, really, apart from the fact that it gives results that are questionable. The clients get a false impression. They spend a lot of money on it. And,
yes.
It's, going up the wrong path for several months before they actually go down the right path. I tend to use an allergenic most of the times now. I have used both ZD and the HA previously, but after that publication, I think it was in 2017, I've pretty much switched to an allergenic as my first choice.
I think it's the kilodalton size, which is important as well, isn't it? But
yeah.
Obviously, sometimes diet, the dog doesn't or the cat won't eat it. So I know a lot of vets in my time, you would hear them saying that the diet was being followed perfectly. But then when you quizzed the clients, you found that the way that they actually got the dog to eat the analergenic is they stuck a bit of tinned dog food just on the top just to make it interesting. I mean, that's probably something we don't want to do, isn't it?
That's right. But I think if you've taken a good history, you should be able to find a novel protein that they can home cook and just flavor it up a little bit for the dog to eat it or the cat to eat it. So I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with that. I think we have to stop being completely strict in the sense that they're not allowed anything else other than the dried food. Then compliance is an issue. But if we actually allow them to give something that is novel to the dog, or infrequently fed, then
that might work. I know Hilary Jackson though talked about, you know, tiny amounts, even, you know, a teaspoon of food, very sensitive dogs that she had, that was enough to kick off the allergies. So we do need to do the food allergy trial as well as we can. So, I mean, what sort of advice, David Bentley, do you give for, you know, trying to keep people on the straight and narrow as far as food trialing?
Well, just like what Anita said, you can add another novel protein to make it more palatable. Kangaroo meat, I worked out, was probably one of the cheapest of these exotic meats to get hold of. I think an Aussie guy told me, because it's just basically shot as vermin and there's no production costs, where some of these other exotic meats are actually farmed, and so the farmer needs to make a profit. So it's certainly one of the cheapest of those exotic meats to use. And I do have some, I have had some cases which have not responded to a hydrolyzed diet and have gone on to respond to a novel protein diet. So I think there's still a lot of debate, to be quite honest, and disagreement amongst dermatologists, as there always is with these things.
Yes.
About which one is the best, hydrolyzed or novel. I mean, some papers suggested originally that 95% of food allergic dogs would respond to a hydrolyzed diet, and then a recent paper was suggesting only 50%.
I remember treating, giving a hypoallergenic diet to a dog, and it actually got quite a lot worse because it was allergic to chicken. And of course, you know, in that particular one, there was quite a lot of chicken. I know the analergenic is interesting because it's made of feather, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know what people think about the duration. I mean, Klaus, if you were mentored by Ed Rosser, will remember the days of 12 weeks. He said he could persuade Brooklyners to buy the bridge, and that's probably true. He had a great personality for getting around the clients. It seems to have dropped back to 8 weeks now. I don't think many people go to 12 weeks anymore. And it's interesting, when it was first brought out in the literature in 1987, in the vet record with Gus Walton, he was only testing for 3 weeks.
3 weeks, yeah.
So I still don't think we've got the complete answer there. I think probably the vast majority can be picked up in 8 weeks. And when you think about it, that's not very long as you're holding the hand of the owner.
If you're looking at, there was that consensus paper that was put together on the BMC for free downloadable. So what in the old days was the Cochrane report style thing. Hensel and his group put together a summary of the food adverse reaction papers. And if you're looking at their collated data, they show that 90% of the papers had found 8 weeks to be sufficient to get a clinical improvement.
That's correct.
What is interesting, if I may,
go on,
Anthony,
Prof.
is, did you see the recent paper by Claude Favreau and colleagues where they used glucocorticoids to suppress or to, if you like, normalize the dog during the initial 2 weeks, I think, of the diet. And then 30% of those that responded well actually went on to have a diagnosis within 3 to 4 weeks. In other words, by cutting the amount of irritation, you actually saw the response to the diet more quickly in a proportion of dogs.